Good morning, students. In today's class, I will explain with some simple example programs how object-oriented programming can be implemented using C++. In our last class, we studied about classes and objects. What are classes? Classes are self-contained entities which consist of certain data called member data and certain function which can access the member data called member functions. So data and function together we call them as members of a class. We also studied the differences between structure and a class and the similarities between structure and a class. A class is simply an extension of structure. A structure also includes certain data called structure member, and the members of a structure can be of any data type. They need not be of same type. They could be of heterogeneous type. Similar to that one, a class also includes certain data called member data. The member data may be of heterogeneous type. This is the similarity between a structure and a class. The difference is the members of a structure, the data members of a structure by default are private or public in nature. That means structure member, you can access them anywhere in the program, need not be within the structure. Whereas the members of a class by default are private in nature, means they are accessible only within the class. So you cannot access them outside the class by default. And we also studied how a class can be defined and how we can create objects of the respective class. In today's class, I will explain with some additional examples the concept of objects and classes in C++. I will illustrate with an example how member functions of a class can be defined and how to call the member functions of a class through the objects of the respective class. So these are the three main objectives of today's class. After attending today's class, you will be in a position to understand how a class can be defined, how a member function can be defined, and how we can call the member function of a class using objects and classes. I will illustrate with some 3 to 4 different examples. Let us start with the first example. The problem is create a class date with dd, mm, and yy as member data. So here the class name is date. The three member data which belongs to the classes are dd, mm, and yy. dd is for date, mm for month, and yy is for year. And this class has two functions: use public function, read date and write date. The purpose of read date is to input the value for the member data dd, mm, and yy. And the purpose of write date function is to display the value of dd, mm, yy, or to display the value of the date in the date format, that is dd/mm/yy. It's a very simple example program which illustrates 4 different concepts: how to define class, how to add member data, how to define member function, how to create object, and how to call member function. All these 5 different features I can illustrate with the example of date class. So the first 2 lines are the header files, #include iostream.h, #include konya.h, class date. That here the general syntax is class name. The class name is date. Open the brace that indicate the beginning of the class. So now we have to include the members of the class. The class has 2 different members. One is data member, the other one is function members. So under the private column, you declare the data member. Private colon int dd, mm, yy. So dd, mm, and yy are the member data. All of them are integer type. And since the data is very, very important in object-oriented programming, member data is declared under the access by a private. The next one is public colon. We have to define the 2 functions, read date and write date. So void read date, open the parenthesis, close it. That indicates that the member function name is read date. It has no argument and return type is also void. Open the brace. The purpose of read date function is to input the value for dd, mm, and yy. So see out, enter day, month, and year. See in dd, mm, yy. Close the function. So you have defined the first function, read date. The second function we will take up. The second function is display date or write date. It's one and the same. See out, dd /mm/yy end line. Close the function. Now we have defined the 2 functions, Then you close the flower bracket by putting a semicolon after that. That indicate now we have closed the class. Now you start with the main function. So generally objects are created inside the main function. The general syntax of object creation is class name followed by the object name 1 comma object name 2 comma etc. So date d1 comma d2. So date is the class name, d1 and d2 naturally are the objects. Now what happens is you have to input the value for the first date, display the first date, input the value for the second date, display date. To input the value for the first date, you already defined a function called read date. To input the first date, you have to call the read date function with d1 object. The general syntax is enter the first date, so call the read date function with d1 object, then display the corresponding date. The function for displaying the date is display function, d1 dot display date. Now you have read the first date and displayed. Same thing you repeat for the second date. See out, enter the second date. Now what happens? You have to input the values of dd, for the second date means you have to call the read date function with d2 object. So d2 dot read date and display it. The function is call the display date function with d2. Close the bracket. So all the 5 different features that are how to define a class. The general syntax is class name. In this example, class date. Now I have to define the member data and the member function. So generally, member data is declared under the access pair private, and the member functions are defined under the access public. So private colon in dd and we add the function by writing the prototype, return type, function name, and the argument if there you have to mention it. Then how to declare object? The general syntax of object creation is class name followed by any number of objects. But one thing you should remember here. In the case of C++, if you want to call any member function, you have to call it always through object name. Either you can use D1 or you can use D2. The corresponding function you can call it. You are calling the read date function, display date function outside the class. You are calling those 2 functions inside the main. This is permitted because the member function are defined under the access specifier public. You can observe the entire main function. I am not able to use the value dd, yy directly because dd, and yy are declared under the access private. Let us start. Let us take a second example, just similar to previous class. Create a class time. Previously the class name is date. Here the class name is time. The member data are HH, hour, minutes, and second, and the functions are read time and display time. Previously, it is also read date and display date. Now it is read time and display time. Just similar to previous example. Those 2 header files are hash include iostream.h, hash include conio.h. Then you start the class name. Class time. And the member data are HH, SS. You declare under the access private colon int HH, SS, SS. HH, SS. Now you define the 2 functions, read time and display time. Here also no return type, no argument. So public colon void read time. The purpose of read time function is to input the values for HH, and SS. In the previous example, the purpose of read date is to input the value for DD, and YY. So see out, enter R, minutes and second. C in HH, SS. Second function is void display time. So here I want to display the time in the format first hour colon. I want 2 dots, month, minutes, then again 2 colon, then SS, end time. So it will display the time in as just similar to your digital clocks. Next, void main. So here the class name is not date. Here the class name is time. Time T1 comma T2. So T1 is also one object. T2 is also one object. Both objects belong to the class called time. Now enter the first time. Now we have to input the values of HH, and SS for the first time in. You have to call the read time with T1 object. Then we display T1 dot display time. Then again input the value for the second time by calling the read time member function with T2 object. Then display T2 dot display. So these 2 programs are exactly similar. One is based on date, other one is based on time. Let us take the third example. Create a class triangle. Here the class name is triangle with the member data, base, height, and area as member data. So here the class has 3 different member data, and the member functions are read. The purpose of read function is to input the values for base and height. Calculate, that is to find the values of the member data area, And the last one is display, to display the area of the triangle. Now you can observe here. The class name is triangle. The member data are base, height, and area. And the functions are read function. The purpose of read function is to input the values for only the two members, base and height. The purpose of the calculate function is to find the values for the third member, area. And the purpose of display function is to display the output variable, that is area. Class, the first two header files already have explained. Class, triangle, private, colon. Here the member data, base, height, and area. You could be, all these three could be a float type also. It could be integer or float. Better declare them as a float. Float, base, height, area. Public. First function is read. The purpose of read function is to input the values for base and height. So see out, enter the base and height. See in base, height. The purpose, first function is over. Next you write the second function. Void calculate. The purpose of this function is to find the values for the third member, area. Area equal to 0.5, that is half, into base into height. So now we have to, what happens is we have the values for all the three members, base and height, through read function, and calculate function gives the value for area. Next we have the third function, void display. Display function is to display the value of area. See out, area equal to the value of the member data, area. End line, close the function, close the class. Now this class name is triangle. Member data are base, height, and area. And functions are read function, calculate function, and display function. In the previous two examples, we had only two functions, read date, display date, read time, and display time. Here we have an additional function. Any number of functions, you can put it inside a class. It need not be only 2, 3. You can have 100 different member functions and 100 different member data could be the members of a class. Void main here, triangle T. So I am creating an object called T of which class? Triangle class. First you call the read function. T dot read means you will get the value. You have to here you have to input the value for base and height. Then when you call the function T dot calculate, it calculates the area of the triangle. Last function is T dot display. So here also all the three different member function, read, calculate, and display function, I am calling with the object. In this example, there is only one object called T. So I am calling those three with only one, T, D, T, etc. But if you have one more object like triangle T1, T2, then you can write it as T1 dot read, T1 dot calculate, T1 dot display. Again followed by T2 dot read, T2 dot calculate, and T2 dot display. So you can call the member function with any object you like. Next example. Create a class complex with real and image as the member data. So this class has two member data. One is real part, other one is imaginary part. And use the public function read complex. The purpose of read complex function is to input the value for real and image member data, and write complex, you to display the complex number in complex number format. What is the complex number format? A plus IB. A is the real part, B is the imaginary part. Class complex private float real comma image. Next, under the public access, public colon void read complex. See out, enter the real and imaginary part, see in real and image. Void display complex real. So you want to display the complex number in complex number format. Real part, within the double quotes you write plus mark, then image, then within the double quote you write image, then end line. Close the function, close the class. Then void main complex C. So here also declare only one object called C. Then you can call the read complex and write complex with C. So in today's class, I gave 4 different example programs illustrating the concept of defining class, adding member data, defining member function, creating object, and how to access the member function. In all these 4 examples, one thing you should observe is all the member function, whatever may be the class, the return type is also void, and the argument is also no arguments are there. So all the member function belonging to the category of function without argument and without return value. The next example, in the next session, I will give an example for function where arguments are there, no return value. Function with argument without return value. Followed by, we can write function, member function with argument and with return values also. Function with argument and with return values. So far, in all the 4 examples, I have written the member function which belonging to the category of function without argument, without return value. So I think hope these 4 programs are sufficient for you to understand the basic concepts of OOPs. Let us consider some simple multiple choice questions on today's class. Which of the following is the default access specifier for a class member? If you don't write anything, all the member belongs to the private access. The correct answer is C. Member function can be accessed. Object name dot member function, class name dot member function, only member function, none of these. So generally, all the member function we can access through one object. So object name dot member function name. The correct answer is A. Dash takes space in the memory. Generally, class will not occupy any space. Only object takes space. So if you have one object, you take some space. If you have one object, you declare 2 objects, means each of these 2 objects takes the same amount of space. So the correct answer is B. Dash operator is used to call a member function through the object. So between the object name and the member function, I'm putting the dot. So dot represents it's an operator name. The correct answer is A. Last one here. Member function declared with private scope can be called from the main function. No. If you declare member function also as a private, you cannot call them in the main function also. That's the reason member function we will declare with the access specifier public, whereas data is declared under the access specifier private. The correct answer is false. Okay, I will conclude today's class. For any of your query, doubt, etc., either you can clear it in your Google Meet doubt clearance class, or you can mail your doubts to my mail ID also. Thank you.